Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Dean Brenner, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to the first meeting in 2024 of the Federal Communications Commission's Technological Advisory Council, or the TAC as we call it for short. For those of you watching this meeting who may not be familiar with the TAC, we are a diverse group of leading technology experts who've been selected by the Federal Communications Commission to provide the Commission with technical expertise to identify important areas of innovation and develop informed technology policy supporting the United States' competitiveness in the global economy. Congratulations to all of you, my colleagues on the TAC here in the meeting room and online. Many of you, of course, are veterans of past TACs, but I know that some of you are new. I know many of you quite well from our work together over the years on important telecommunications issues, but for those of you who I don't yet know well, I'm looking forward to getting to know you through our work together on the TAC. I'd also like to welcome our dedicated colleagues on the staff of the Federal Communications Commission, especially the staff of the Office of Engineering and Technology. All of us look forward to working closely with you and providing input to you in your important work for the American people. Now, it would be a significant honor to chair the TAC or to serve as a TAC member at any time, but at this particular time, as broadband in all forms and via all technologies has become so crucial for every facet of American life, and yet we know that the digital divide persists in this country, our work is especially important. That would be more than enough to make me personally eager to take on the work of leading the TAC, but there's more, there's much more. As FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel said in announcing my appointment in 2022, the United States must lead the world in advancing ambitious 6G research and development. We know that maintaining our leadership in high-priority emerging technology requires careful planning and execution. There are signals that need our attention, from the need for more spectrum to the vulnerabilities of the supply chains to the changing dynamics of global standards development. We are starting that work here and now by reestablishing the TAC, and charging it to conceptualize 6G to help set the stage for our leadership, close quote. Those words remain true today, even as 5G and 5G Advanced continue to evolve, improve, and roll out more broadly, as Wi-Fi 7 begins to roll out, as satellite-based 5G deployment begins, as beneficial uses of artificial intelligence and machine learning to improve the efficiency of broadband networks rise to the forefront, as fiber continues to deepen and broaden, and as advanced spectrum sharing becomes even more important. My point here is that all of these technology developments are important in isolation from one another, but these technologies are even more important when viewed together and when viewed in conjunction with our ongoing work here to advise the FCC and to help define and develop 6G. And that's where we all come in, giving the best possible input, advice, and especially recommendations to the Commission at a time of extraordinarily important technological changes. That's what we've each signed up to take on. We will do our work through 3 working groups: artificial intelligence / machine learning, advanced spectrum sharing, and 6G. As usual, in the 3 working groups and then as the full TAC, we will strive to reach consensus and, most importantly, develop actionable recommendations. Let me conclude by thanking all of my fellow TAC members. Again, we're all volunteer advisors to the FCC. Truly, our work on the TAC, although voluntary, could not become more important. So thank you very much, and let me turn things over to Ron Rapazzi, the FCC's Chief Engineer, for his opening comments.
Thank you, Dean, and good morning to everyone. And first of all, I know traffic was a little bad for some this morning, so take a deep breath, relax. You're here safely, that's what counts. Welcome, everyone, and good morning. We have individuals online as well that are participating remotely. And we've got a really good turnout here, and a lot of new faces, some familiar faces from well before in the past that I've had a chance to work with in many capacities. So welcome. And thank you in advance for volunteering your time. As Dean was concluding in his remarks, this is voluntary, and there's a great degree of talent and creativity that's in this room and on the line here for the topics that we're going to be uncovering in the next cycle of the TAC, the 2024 cycle of the TAC. So there's been a few things that have happened since the TAC concluded in the last cycle from a commission standpoint. Some most recently was this satellite capacity from space, SES item that was adopted at the FCC meeting just last Thursday, not even a week ago, that creates a new dynamic sharing framework that involves satellite and terrestrial uses of the spectrum. We've had a WRC, World Radio Conference, that concluded, Work 23, that concluded last November. There are a lot of changes internationally when it comes to spectrum allocations. We have developments in the area of IMT 2030. So we're talking about the next generation 6G of technologies that we're on the cusp of when it comes to planning and preparing for the next generation of wireless networks. And the work that this group does is the underpinning technology evaluations and actionable recommendations that the Commission will use to inform its decisions on these spectrum topics as it moves forward from a technical, operational, and regulatory standpoint. So the work of this TAC is extremely important, and I look forward to the working group activities that are going to ensue in the coming months. Thank you, Dean, for chairing the TAC for this cycle, and to all the working group chairs that we're going to hear preparatory remarks throughout the morning on the various working groups, as well as the FCC liaisons that will be involved in the 3 working groups. So welcome aboard, and I look forward to all the work ahead of us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ron. I'll turn things over to Martin, our designated federal officer, for any remarks he wants to make.
Hello. I just wanted to add my thanks for everyone to be here. I'm delighted that the TAC has started up again. So here we are. I just wanted to go through maybe a couple of housekeeping items. So we have quite a few folks in the room today to keep the discussion somewhat orderly. If you want to turn your tent cards sideways so that we know you have a comment for anything. And then for folks on Teams, we'll just make sure you raise your hand, and we'll keep an eye on that as well. Also, if you're using the microphones in the room, they are manual, so just make sure to turn them off when you're not speaking. I don't have any other administrative remarks, though, but thanks, everybody.
Sean, anything from you as our deputy federal official?
Yep, well, just to say thank you to all the 55 members of the TAC. I'm really excited to be part of the TAC for this charter, and looking forward to your recommendations and all the challenges that we're going to go through the meetings. So looking forward to everything. Thank you.
Thanks. So one other housekeeping matter, since we are a federal advisory committee, we work under FACA, the dictates of FACA, the Federal Advisory Committee statute. So we're not going to do a roll call, but there's a sign-up sheet that went around. So for your attendance, please do sign in. If you're attending online, we're keeping track of who's there. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to hear from Paula Silberthau of the FCC's Office of General Counsel, and she's going to give us a thorough briefing on the FACA, how the TAC operates under the FACA and under various other important statutes and FCC regulations. I think Paula is on the team, so Paula, please take it away.
Okay, thanks very much. Well, this is going to be fairly boring, relevant to what you guys will be doing. But let me just go through some of the basics of FACA, things to keep in mind. If you could go to someone can run to the first page of the slide here. There we go. So the Federal Advisory Committee Act has been recodified. It's Chapter 10 of 5 U.S.C., and it governs how most federal advisory committees operate unless they're exempted by statute, which the TAC is not. There's some guiding principles, which is why we're having a public meeting, because the first principle is openness in government, diverse and balanced membership, and public accountability. And this is reflected in some of the rules that will follow. Next slide. Okay, so first, we can't just call a meeting randomly. We have to give generally 15 calendar days notice in the Federal Register. And we always give meeting notices so that members of the public can be aware of it. And just so everyone's aware, meetings can be just the way we are now by video, a mixture of video and in person, internet-based conferences, teleconferences, etc. Next slide. And all meetings of the parent advisory committees have to be open to the public, and people are allowed to submit written statements. And in fact, members of the public may comment on things if our committee guidelines or just if time permits that. Next slide. This could be relevant to what you folks will be doing. Under very limited circumstances, meetings or portions of meetings may be closed with the approval of the head of the agency and after we give notice in the Federal Register. So this could be where information involves trade secrets, classified government materials, national security matters related to foreign policy, etc. And I don't have a sense of whether some of what you might be discussing would be considered highly confidential or nearly classified. But if you feel that anything that's going to be discussed in a meeting is something that should be discussed only, in a limited way without public access, please get in touch with Martin or other members of staff. Let them know, because I have worked on closing meetings a couple of times. It goes through a number of different steps, and we can't do it at the last minute. It has to be approved by the general counsel, by the agency head, as the slide says, announced in the Federal Register. So please keep that in mind. If you just have an inkling that something shouldn't be public for legitimate reasons, let Martin know, and we will take steps to close pieces of the meeting if that's necessary. Okay, next slide. There are some basic, housekeeping requirements under FACA. We have to keep minutes of meeting, and that, as was just said, includes a record of the persons present, and we have to keep a list of the documents received, discussed, approved, etc. And in the interest of openness, all of our committees typically put all these public documents on their website so that they're accessible. And that would include sometimes we take transcripts, studies that you folks propose that would be discussed at a public meeting, all of that. Next slide. The ethics group always ask me to remind people that all members have a continuing obligation to disclose interests in or connections to persons or entities that are regulated by or have interests in matters that could come before the committee and that could present a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest. And in many cases, this is resolved simply by disclosure at the meeting or at the working groups you're in. This does not necessarily mean that you would no longer be able to serve, but most of you individually have discussed this with the staff at OGC that review for conflicts matters. And if you have any questions because of a new representation or job change, etc., please get in touch with your DFO, or if you know who within OGC did your initial vetting, feel free to get in touch with them directly. If there are changes in your representation or employment while serving on the committee, please call OGC. If you are representing an employer and your job changes, often we can just, the agency might reappoint you to serve for another employer, but there are steps to take. So if you are anticipating a month or 2 months from now, at any point, a change in your jobs, that would require a reappointment to represent the new employer. So please tell us in advance. Please don't tell us like 2 days before the meeting, because that would be problematic. Okay, next slide. Your committee chair and vice chair are very important folks for this committee. They serve as your focal point. They have helped provide input about establishing informal work groups. And as you've seen, the chair conducts all committee meetings and is involved in suggesting meeting agendas. So if you have ideas about that, feel free to get in touch with your chair. Next slide. Your DFO, Martin, they have statutory duties and duties under the regulations the GSA has for FACAs. The DFOs are required to call the meetings, to approve agendas, to attend the meetings, to maintain all committee records, and you'll hear more about that later, I think, from Derice. And recently, we've been requiring that the DFO be copied on all emails pertaining to the business of the committee or its working groups. And that's important because that ensures that the agency has copies of all relevant records, and the DFO will then be sure that that is sent to the relevant mailbox to maintain and to keep the federal records people very happy. The DFO also has to ensure that meetings, minutes of meetings are taken. Next slide. I'll just mention this briefly, and another person will go through it more specifically, but there's a general record schedule, and we have to maintain our records in accordance with it. And it's media neutral, so it applies to all records, regardless of format. So it could be paper, it could be visual, it could be, electronic, etc. Okay, next slide. Right, I already mentioned this, that committee members need to ensure that the DFO has all relevant records, because that facilitates our meeting our obligations to the record people. Okay, next slide. Working groups. This actually is important so we don't trip up here. Working groups can gather information, but not by doing surveys, develop work plans, draft reports, discuss preliminary findings. You can meet, unlike the full session of your committees, the working groups, there'll be less than a quorum of the total membership, and you can meet in closed sessions. And we like this because you can meet flexibly, you can formulate your own schedule, you can meet on short notice or long notice, and we don't have to publish in advance, 15 days in advance, notice of your meetings. I will drop a sad footnote here, which is that there is a GSA rule that has been proposed, and my understanding, the rules will come out sometime like in the next 6 months, that would substantially constrain the way working groups might be able to operate. If that happens, I'll know, and I will let everyone know about it. But at this point, we're operating under the existing rules, which gives you a lot of flexibility, and you can meet privately. Next slide. Here's what working groups can't do. You can't function as the de facto parent advisory committee, and that means you can't make decisions that are binding on the full committee, and you can't have meetings that are attended by more than half the quorum of the full committee. And anything that working groups come up with will hopefully be excellent, but they need to be fully discussed, debated, reviewed, etc., at the full committee meetings. They cannot just be rubber stamped. It cannot be, aha, we have this great subcommittee recommendation, who's in favor? It doesn't work that way. It has to be fully evaluated. And the reason it has to be fully evaluated, meaning, discussed by the parent committee, is simply that the working groups, because they're not an advisory committee, they were done in private, and they were done without complying with rules that would be applicable to the parent committee. So therefore, the recommendations are just that, and they have to be fully debated in a public manner by the full committee. And so I'm sort of emphasizing that because there have been times when people did not realize it and they just expected that once the working group had its recommendations, they could be sent directly to the commissioners. And it doesn't work that way. Everything has to run through all of you on the full committee. Okay, next slide. Lou, do we have the next slide here?
Yeah, we see it in the meeting room.
Okay, there, it just turned for me. There was like a lag. Surveys, sometimes surveys are really tempting because they seem like they'd be really helpful. Unfortunately, the working groups and the advisory committees are subject, in our view, to the Paperwork Reduction Act. And if you have a standard survey that's going to go out to 10 or more people, that would trigger the PRA, and that would require advance approval of the survey by OMB, which takes between 3 and 6 months. So in most cases, you folks don't want to wait 6 months to get your information. You want to do it earlier. So if you do feel that you want to reach out to people to get additional information, please contact your DFO right away, who will work with the OGC PRA experts. There are often ways to formulate questions. If you could go to the next slide, to formulate questions in a more general manner, and to be able to ask it, just posting open-ended questions online, or sending your quote survey to select people who are under 10 in number. We've helped a couple of different working groups that wanted sort of more narrow surveys or opinions to be able to do that without triggering the PRA. So if you see that coming, please get in touch with Martin or with the liaison or your working group, and they'll coordinate with us, and usually our PR experts can figure out ways to manage the situation. But please do not just, post something that looks like a survey. If that happens, not only does the FCC get, sort of get a slap on the wrist, but we cannot use the results of a survey that violates the PRA. Okay, so that would just be, counterproductive. I think I already mentioned this. Your informal working groups are not subject to the public notice requirements of the FACA. They don't have to be open to the public. The number of working groups should be less than a quorum of the full committee. Next slide. And at the working group meetings, we typically ask that your discussions sort of remain pretty much confidential among the people who are there. If your working group has matters that might be of interest to other working group members or to just generally other members of the full committee. Um, Other people can observe, anyone on your full committee or other working groups can observe what's happening at your meeting. But if you're not a member, you just can't participate. You just can't, talk at the other working group meetings, because, then you might be counted as a member and we might exceed the quorum. But it doesn't mean that you can't go to find out what's going on. And often there is some sort of overlapping tasks so that you might want to know what is going on in the other working group. So you can do that. It just needs to be managed. Next slide. Also, similarly, even though the working groups are closed in most cases, unless you totally open it to the public, they're typically closed, and you can invite third parties, people to make presentations at the closed meetings. However, if you have several topics, once the invited party presents on his or her topic and answers any questions, then they need to be asked to leave the meeting and not stay for the other parts of the agenda. Okay, next slide. Just so you know, the ex parte rules do apply to presentations made to a committee or its working group, but we typically have an ex parte notice, public notice, that is put out at the beginning of the charter of your advisory committee. And it basically says that we will, delay your having to file ex partes individually, but before anything comes up in other agendas or items where people want to rely on something that you've recommended or that's been heard at a meeting, we would arrange to have staff file an ex parte in that other proceeding. So for the time being, and Martin, just like a reminder, we should be sure to get this done for your group. You don't have to worry about filing ex partes if what you're doing right now is touching on other proceedings. But if you do want that material to be part of the other proceeding and to be put in the record, either you can file it or please ask staff to make such a filing. Okay, next slide. Yep, this is what I just said. We'll issue an exemption notice for your presentations. By the way, the exemption, if you are, representing, for example, your employer, this doesn't mean the ex parte runs to matters that relate to the work of the advisory committee. The exemption doesn't mean that if you represent a company and your company wants to make a presentation, have a meeting, etc., on behalf of the company, your regular ex parte rules will still apply. The exemption is only for matters where the discussion involves presentations on behalf of the advisory committee. Okay. Next slide. Right, what I just said. Next slide. Occasionally we have people who are asked to make presentations in other forums, TV, interviews, radios, social media, whatever. And you're being asked to comment on the status of items before the committee or before a working group. So a couple things. One, if you are discussing matters that have been voted and are already public, You don't need to make any disclaimer. That's fine. You just report what's happened. The working group or the committee has done this or that. But if you're asked for your individual views on something like, well, do you think that that vote was a good idea? Do you think that recommendation is a good thing? Please just make clear in your presentation that if you're expressing your individual views, that's what your statement is, and that you're not representing the views of the full committee. This has occasionally created problems inadvertently in the past. So just try to be careful to distinguish if you're making a public presentation between what's been voted or has been made public by the committee or its working groups and your individual views on that. Next slide. Okay, we just covered that. Yeah, we just don't want to, we just need to be careful not to create the impression that your individual views might be the views of the full committee if that's not the case. Okay, next slide. And if you are making a public facing statement, either in writing or a live presentation, et cetera, especially, I guess, if it's a written document, you might want to just touch bases with the DFO in advance so that there's no suggestion that the views that are expressed are a position of either the full committee or possibly the commission, where that might not be the case. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned earlier, if you're appointed in a representative capacity and you're no longer going to be employed, retiring, switch jobs, whatever, please immediately advise the DFO so that alternative arrangements can be made, which would either be, which could be something like if you're going into, your own consulting practice, perhaps you get reappointed as an SGE. If you're going to be working for another employer, perhaps the new employer as you become their representative. And sometimes we've had people who've retired, but their former employer still wants them to be their representative, and that's fine too. But there are a variety of scenarios, and we just really need to know about it in advance to work with you to keep everything on track. Next slide. I guess that's the end of it. Okay. Happy to answer questions if there are any.
That's perfect. Thank you very much, Paula. So,
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yep, thanks. And if anyone does have any questions about anything that Paula went over, you can always reach out to Martin. Yeah. Oh, Donna?
Thank you, and I think there are two of us with our tents up. So I just want to make sure I understand, if I've not signed up for a working group, but I go and listen to what's being presented, and I have a view that's going to be different from the output, I don't express it there. I wait till it makes it to the full TAC. And I believe she said earlier that if I'm in a working group and a report comes out, I shouldn't expect that people don't edit it afterwards. And I just want to make that, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. Thank you.
Well, the editing process is extraordinarily transparent, and I might even say bordering sometimes on the painful. So you will, when our working groups are working on reports, we use the track changes, and we debate all the wording, and that'll be very transparent.
Thank you.
Yes. So we'll get back to you, I promise. So I would like to take a quick pause. Chairwoman Rosenworcel is here, and I know she wants to speak to us. So why don't we do that? We'll hear from our chairwoman, and then I promise we'll get back to your question.
important mechanics right now, and this just got formal. I'm standing here and the seal and the flag and all that. I don't actually want to interrupt you. I just want to say thank you. I'm really grateful for your service. I'm really grateful that you are choosing to spend your time and talents with us on this committee, and I want to thank a few people. In particular, I want to thank Dean Brenner for agreeing to do this, not once, but twice. He came back for more. I also want to say thank you to Martin and to Sean, who are from our Office of Engineering and Technology and are going to do an extraordinary job being your primary liaisons with the agency itself, as well as with my office. When you are chairwoman of the FCC, you love all your advisory committees like your children. You love them equally. But this committee does have a record of achievement that really stands out. Because when I was looking back before I came here this morning, there are so many extraordinary things that happened at this agency that took place in this committee first. It was a decade ago that the TAC formed a first working group to discuss the airwaves we'd need for 5G. The TAC did extraordinary technical work on the 3.5 gigahertz band, which is our first big exercise in mid-band sharing that has been a model, not just in this country for other conversations about sharing, but for globally what it means as a regulator to set up new systems of dynamic spectrum access. This TAC was working on cloud computing before it was a buzzword and anyone was talking about it. You also worked on some really important efforts to prevent mobile device theft, something that we don't talk about in the same ways as a result of your work. And you also did work about something we still do talk a lot about, which is how we manage the transition from legacy technologies. In addition, the TAC was formidable when it came to our earliest understanding of open radio access networks, which continues to be very important in our discussions about making our equipment markets for communications more competitive and also more secure. That's a pretty incredible record of being first. So the pressure's on, and we have assigned you some tasks that are important. First of all, you're going to continue something that Dean got started with this group last time around, which is developing leadership policies and plans for 6G. No rest for the weary. While the rest of the world is still talking about 5G, we are going to be careening ahead, and you'll be leading the way. We're also going to have a working group that's dedicated to studying advanced spectrum sharing techniques. I can't emphasize how important this is. Our airwaves are getting awfully crowded. It's time to be a lot more thoughtful about how we distribute them. We want to be open to all good ideas, all good opportunities, and there is such value in making sure that the commercial sector participates and leads this discussion. You've got an interest in optimizing our airwaves, making sure that they're used for innovative purposes. You want to protect our incumbent uses, but you might also see opportunities others miss. So I'm really grateful that you're taking on this charge. And then, of course, because it's Washington in 2024, we're going to have a working group on AI. You might have noticed in this town, most discussions now involve a noun and a verb in the words AI. We're no exception. But the truth is, for all of the warnings about AI, I'm the contrarian. I'm the optimist. I think that there's a lot of upsides if we think about how we can use this technology for network optimization and network resiliency. And I'm pretty confident that there are people in this room who might feel the same way and are going to help us figure it out and help us change the tone and tenor of the discussion of artificial intelligence in this town. Because I think we need examples of some of the really great things it can do. And when I think about networks and scarcity and opportunities for abundance, this is the place where we're going to figure that out. And this is the place where we're going to offer examples, not just here in Washington, but to the world. So that's a little pressure. And the thing is, I'm really confident in all of you. Just look at the talent we've assembled in this room. We need your input right now. We have so many challenges when it comes to communications in our nation's networks, new ways to be efficient, challenges tackling old laws. But as history will demonstrate, some of the smartest ideas have started with the TAC, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with next. I realize you have administrative tasks ahead of you. I don't want to get in the way of how and when we'll be editing working group products. I have all confidence you will figure that out, but I am very much looking forward to the more substantive work you produce. And please know that through our representatives from the Office of Engineering Technology, my office, we will always be available to you if you have questions, concerns, or interests, and you want to share them with us. Thank you all so much for your service. Thank you for letting me interrupt you this morning. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Okay, so with that, I hope I answered your question, Donna, and our colleague from Mavenir had a question.
Yeah, so I understand the working groups meet once a week. So if for some reason the TAC member is not able to attend that meeting, does a person, first of all, is there an option to delegate responsibility from the same company to another person? And if so, does the person go through a full vetting? And is he part of the full TAC, or is there an option where he's just a part of the working group that you're participating in?
Martin, do you want to handle that? Or Paula could handle that for us. Paula?
Definitely. We actually encourage people who feel that situation may arise to have their employers designate alternates. And the alternates are reviewed and vetted basically in the same manner as the primary reps. But this allows an alternate to attend with, let people know that it'll be an alternate. But, if you think that may happen, please have your employer propose an alternate, and the appointment can be reviewed, vetted by ethics, and go through and have the same rights to attend the meetings. We just can't have two people. There were occasions where alternates and members tried to attend the same meeting and get two votes. No, it doesn't work that way. Each company gets, it's like a cool trick, but each company just gets one vote. But yeah, they could then attend and everything would go smoothly. So we actually, the ethics people would kill me for saying this, but we actually encourage people to provide for alternates.
And I just wanted to also add, thank you for that, Paul. I wanted to add about the working groups. The working groups are really where the hard work of the TAC is done. And when Paula was talking about surveys, in my experience, we haven't done anything like that, but most of the working groups have a heavy diet of guest speakers who come in and make presentations. And when she was saying about deliberations versus the guest speakers, a lot of the working group meetings might be wire to wire. The whole meeting could be hearing from a guest speaker or guest speakers, and often we'll have to have kind of a, we'll say, okay, this meeting, no guest speakers because we got to talk about the output that we're working on. But that is really the main way that the TAC itself gets input from many other, groups and companies and interests in the telecommunications industry. Other questions?
All right. Thank you. I think it's probably a question for Martin. Last year on AIML, we recorded presentations, not the deliberations, and then posted them. This really helped to draw in additional speakers because they could sort of see what it was about. So it was really helpful. But what's the guidance this year for recording the guest speaker presentations and publishing them, posting them?
Paula, can you give us your input on that, please?
I would need to think a little bit more about it. Obviously, that has a lot of benefits, but it's the first time that I've been involved in that, so I'll just have to get back to people on that.
I will also add that's a continuing issue because if someone's a member of the working group but can't attend a meeting, that person would like to be able to watch the meeting afterwards and then fully participate. So, yeah, it's an important question, and we'll make sure everyone knows the answer. Andy?
Thanks, Dean. So on slide 19, there a note here that the number of committee members serving on a working group should be less than a quorum of the full committee. So 3 questions. What defines a quorum? Number 2 is how do you officially define a member of a working group? Because a lot of times people just email us and say, hey, I want to listen in on your meetings. You know, do they become members? And then also I assume that alternates are not double counted for this purpose.
Paula, can you take a first crack at that? I have my view on a few of those, but.
Sure, yeah. So, you know, typically, unless we have rules that say otherwise, a quorum would be half of the membership plus 1. Okay, so, you know, 20 people, 11 would be the quorum. So we want to stay below that number. In terms of the second question was if people can come. So you're designated as a member. My understanding is for all of our groups, we have lists and it says, you know, X, Y, and Z folks are members. So that's how you know if you are a full member. You are on the membership list. You'll be designated as a member. And Martin, excuse me, Martin would take care of that. But as I noted, other people can come. The meetings are interesting. They're important. Other people who are on the committee can come and listen in. So that's how we'd handle it. I can't remember what the third question was. Sorry.
I assume we don't double count alternates when we're counting the members.
Correct.
And yeah, thanks for that, Paul. And absolutely, like the members of the working group, that is absolutely defined. There's not, you know, if you want to come and listen to the meetings, that's different. You're not a member of the working group. So, you know, Martin and Sean will have the list of who the members are of your working group, and that's a done deal. Other questions or comments? Okay. So again, as you know, if there are questions moving forward on what's the procedure for this or that, our doors are obviously open, email, call, whatever. And thank you, Paula. That was really a good presentation. Thanks a lot. So now we will turn to presentations from our working groups. And again, our working groups haven't actually fully formed yet or met, but these are sort of coming attractions based on the charter. And I should clarify, there's a written charter of the TAC that lays out what we've been asked to do, what output the FCC is looking for. That charter has been vetted, you know, prepared initially by the Office of Engineering and Technology, and that's been fully vetted within the commission. So that's our call to action. That's what we're asked to do. And in the charter, it's broken down by working group. So the first thing that we will now hear is a presentation from the Advanced Spectrum Sharing Working Group, which is chaired by Andy and Monisha.
Great, thanks, Dean. I'll start out, and then Monisha will take it. I am Andy Clegg. I'm here representing the Wireless Innovation Forum on the TAC. I'll let Monisha introduce herself.
Monisha Ghosh, representing the Wireless Institute at the University of Notre Dame.
Okay, so let me see if we can get the slides up. And let me see if we can get the wireless remote to work. It does, great. So we are the Advanced Spectrum Sharing Working Group. We plan to meet on Tuesdays from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. That was the same time and day we met last cycle. So please plan accordingly. Our first meeting will not be this afternoon. It'll be Tuesday, March 26th, so 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today, is it not? No, it is 1 week. Okay, yes, sorry. Okay, great. 1 week from today. If you would like to be a member of the working group, please email Monisha and myself, and also copy the TAC group at fcc.gov, so TAC at fcc.gov. Martin, do they need to copy you, or do you get the TAC at fcc.gov? You do, okay, so yes, just please be sure to email all 3 of those to be added to the members of the Spectrum Sharing Working Group. And Keep in mind, we can only add members who have been officially vetted by the FCC for TAC membership. So please don't email us if you are pending vetting by the FCC unless Martin advises you to do so. So please only email us and ask to be added as a member if you've already been vetted. So we'll just go through the items that are on the Advanced Spectrum Sharing Working Group Charter. Again, the charter is provided by the TAC or by the FCC through the TAC. So the Spectrum Sharing Working Group has not met. It did not create this charter. This charter was provided to us, but it tells us what we will be discussing during the meetings of the Spectrum Sharing Working Group. So we'll go through, these slides are also meant to be reusable at future meetings. That's why the progress thing says TBD. We'll add to that as we do our work. So there ended up being 10 items on our charter, and so I'll go through each of those. Some of them were broken down into more than one question, so I've broken those down into, Part A, Part B, et cetera. So the first item on our charter is, what will advanced sharing frameworks and architectures look like in the future? And I'm not going to provide any color because we haven't met yet, so we're not here to discuss any progress on these particular items. The Advanced Spectrum Sharing Charter, second part is 2A, how will spectrum sharing models adapt and evolve to meet the growing demand for spectrum access among various services to support multiple purposes? 2B is, how can the interplay between terrestrial and satellite services be complemented in sharing models to promote more efficient spectrum use? It's a very timely item. Number 3, to what extent can the FCC optimize its propagation models to reflect less conservative, more realistic assumptions and support more intensive sharing while still protecting against harmful interference? I had to keep myself from writing a white paper on this the moment I saw that particular one. 3B, are there specific bands where improved propagation models offer a pathway to liberalize performance capabilities beyond what the FCC permits today? Item number 4, what steps can be taken to better facilitate spectrum repurposing efforts? How can potential intraband and interband issues be identified and addressed early in the process? This is particularly important, when you look at what's happening at mid-band spectrum, for example. How can incumbent services be better informed about the nature of adjacent or nearby spectrum environments, and how can users be encouraged to take steps needed to accommodate new spectrum uses in those environments? And then finally, what steps and processes should be used regarding adjacent band spectrum users' wide receiver bandwidth? For example, the passband extends into adjacent bands. And then item number 5, there we go. What is the current state of the art in receiver technology? What state-of-the-art active antenna array and filter technologies can be utilized to mitigate potential harmful interference? How can advanced antenna systems help reduce both inter-system and intra-system interference and enhance intra-system performance? For example, beam versus null steering. What are the cost-benefit trade-offs on utilizing the current filter technologies or advanced antenna systems? And finally, are there specific bands where improved receiver technologies offer significantly improved coexistence beyond what is permitted today? So I will switch to item 6, and then Monisha will go from here.
Thanks, Andy. So 6A asks, what are the candidate bands or services that can coexist with low-power, indoor-only operations, such as factory automation? And 6B asks the questions, what are the sharing mechanisms to consider in these situations? Okay, I need to do that. There is a lot of attention on mid-band these days, but the TAC, Advanced Spectrum Sharing Group, will also ask What are sharing mechanisms to consider among various services above 95 gigahertz, including passive services? Another recurrent question is what role should sensors play in informing spectrum use and in supplementing spectrum sharing databases? We have some methods today in CBRS where sensors are used. Can those modes be enhanced for other bands? What are the trade-offs between efficient spectrum use and environmental considerations, including sustainability and energy efficiency, topics that are becoming increasingly important as we look at 6G, particularly in the future? And finally, the last charter item, 10, what methods can support the Commission in identifying spectrum bands that have the most potential and flexibility for sharing and repurposing? 10B, what are the candidate bands and which bands should be prioritized? 10C, how should those bands be combined or separated for federal and or non-federal users? And finally, the last charter item, what are the optimal coordination processes between stakeholders to better support implementation and consideration of these methods? Many of these topics were discussed in the last TAC session. I don't think we had time to address all of them, and hopefully we can pick up on those that we left behind the previous time and dig deeper. Meanwhile, a lot has been going on in the world, as most of us know. Our last meeting was in August. Since then, we've had the National Spectrum Strategy and the Implementation Plan, both released by NTIA, FCC's partner agency on the federal side. WRC 23 concluded, and agenda items and study items were identified for WRC 27. 6 gigahertz sharing has moved forward with 2 new activities. The very low power rule was issued, followed by also an NPRM looking at advanced topics like geofencing. And the automatic frequency coordination, the AFC, is well underway to being certified and hopefully deployed. There was recently an FCC public notice on access to unassigned spectrum inventory. So this is in response, I guess, to the fact that the FCC doesn't have its auction authority yet, and it was requesting ways to deal with spectrum that they already have and how best they could get it out there. Rules for supplement coverage from space just came out a few days ago, and it is one of the things that we will be looking at. And of course, as the Chairwoman mentioned, AI/ML continues exponential adoption and technical refinements, and we will work very closely with the AI and ML group to understand how specifically advanced spectrum sharing could benefit from AI/ML. Just as a matter of note, for new attendees, we usually work pretty closely with the other working groups. This time, there are just 3 total ones. Spectrum sharing is very relevant to 6G, and we can benefit from the discussions of AI/ML. Yeah, that's I guess it. If there are any questions, Andy and I are happy to address them.
Amit?
So, as many of us recall, during the last session, we struggled with a very fundamental question, and it has been repeated in the National Spectrum's policy. And even today, Chairwoman Rezon also mentioned that we want to improve the efficient use of spectrum. And one fundamental question that we define, what do we mean by efficient use of spectrum? Many of us have different perspectives, different interpretations. Will it be within our charter premises to have at least make an attempt about how we define efficient use of spectrum. If we can do that, I think a lot of debates can be calmed down. That's my suggestion.
We don't have a specific charter asking that question, but it's kind of behind many of the questions in the charter. And I think this is a discussion that has become broader than the TAC. Both the National Spectrum Strategy and the implementation has brought up questions about spectrum valuation. There have been calls for more openness among the different agencies to share more of their operational uses, because without that, it's really hard to figure out spectrum utilization and how it can be improved. So yeah, I hope we can come to some more definitive conclusions this time than we did the last time. Andy?
Yeah, and Amit, what you ask is a hard question anytime, you get in a room and you discuss spectrum efficiency, all hell breaks loose kind of thing. But I think there are cases where it's obvious that you've improved efficiency, and I'll quote the CBRS case. There, the Navy was using it in coastal areas, and there were a few inland places where it was used, but then in the vast majority of the country geographically, that spectrum was not used for anything, and now it's used for broadband connectivity. I think that anybody would say is an increase in efficiency. So I think in some cases it's obvious, but I agree in other cases, how you define whether spectrum is being used more efficiently is a worthy discussion topic. I'd prefer the committee not get bogged down in defining that, but it is something we should at least discuss.
Yeah, all that I'm requesting is some sort of broad understanding, right? And often people confuse with spectrum efficiency. I'm not debating about spectrum efficiency, just how do we define efficient use of spectrum? If we can have a broad understanding agreement, I think that'll help. Thank you.
That is a very good dialogue from all three of you, so thanks. The only thing I would add is, right, it's not going to be one talismanic, comprehensive, one-size-fits-all answer to the question, but having at least some sort of common understandings, plural, about what makes spectrum be used more efficiently is obviously lies behind all the questions in the charter, and is certainly, grist for the mill without having an endless debate about bits per hertz or whatever. Okay, thank you for that. Other questions?
Thank you, Andy, Manisha. I just have a general question. Is there an archive of material the working group worked on in the past that new TAC members could access? This is also maybe a general question for the other working groups also.
So I'll give my understanding of the answer, but Martin, please feel free to edit what I say. The answer is yes, and I think the easiest thing to do, the TAC has a web page on the FCC's website, and if you go on that page, you can see all the presentations from prior TAC meetings, which includes all the output from the working groups. So if you go to that page and you look at for the meetings that we had in 2023, for example, you'll see all the work of the working groups culminating in the meeting that we had in August, where we actually made final recommendations. And you can do that going back, I'm not sure exactly how many years, but you can certainly do that going back in the past. So yeah, we don't want to just pretend that we're totally starting from scratch, so it's a good question. Thanks. Donna?
Thank you, and I appreciate my colleague's comment about efficient use, because there's the evolution of one service in a band that's sharing with another service in a band, and does their continual evolution make them efficient versus putting other signals in there more efficient? So I can't wait to have that discussion, and also I think that this is going to be a great group chaired by my friend who I haven't seen in a while, but it's also interesting to think about the sharing between two different but homogeneous systems versus a homogeneous system sharing with a constantly evolving and different type of service in the way in which satellites are. So thank you very much, and I look forward to this group.
Yeah, that is all grist for the mill. So Any other questions about the spectrum sharing group?
Maybe online, see if there's any online.
I think there was a question from Marty online. Thank you.
Yeah, we can hear you, Marty. Go ahead. Marty, can you hear us?
Marty
Can you hear
Cooper?
me?
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, and I just wanted to make sure that Andy lets us know what the list of people we have to send memos to join your group. You had apparently we have to send at least 3 or 4 different requests, and I just want to make sure you publicize those addresses.
Yeah, I guess the best reference would be that slide number 31 in the deck. Or, I don't know, Martin, should we send out a thing to all the TAC saying, here's who to email if you want to join the different groups?
I would appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll do that for sure. Thanks. Thanks, Marty. Any other questions online about the spectrum sharing group? Okay. Oh, okay, Greg? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. The practice that we had in the past and that was mentioned is that when multiple groups are talking about a subject that is combined by the two of them, such as spectrum sharing and AI, sometimes we would have joint meetings. I think with the quorum rule that I heard earlier from Paula, that wouldn't be allowed anymore. Is that correct?
That is a great question. I think we need to go back and ask that question. Inevitably, there is overlap between the groups. And that's not a bad thing at all. And when it ripens into something very specific, where two groups are literally debating the exact same question, then right, of course, it makes sense to try to have the two groups have one meeting. So, Greg, we'll check back with Paula and get the guidance on that. Lisa?
I would like to clarify that question, and maybe we'll look at it from 2 different ways. One is if the groups meet jointly and do any type of debate or discussion, but it is quite often helpful, especially if we can find a rare guest speaker that's hard to get. Often we would have meetings where it was listen only, and we made a rule intentionally up front not to debate.
I agree totally with that, and that's a whole separate issue. There's obviously no point in having the same guest speaker give the same presentation to two groups when the presentation is on something that overlaps. And then also to your point there, we very rarely have actual deliberation in a meeting with the guest speaker to begin with. So we'll follow with Paula about all of that. So thanks, Lisa. Any other questions, comments, issues? David.
Thanks, Dean. And we may not have to worry about it unless it comes up, but I guess to the extent that there is an item that needs to be worked on by 2 of the working groups, would it be possible to form a sub-working group drawn from both of those groups that would be below the quorum level?
Yeah, we can go back and ask about that, David. We've tried in the past, even though, again, it's inevitable and a good thing that the work of each working group does have overlap. There's no question about that. The charter is really the guiding document for each working group. And so the charter, as Andy and Monisha went through for their group, it's got the 10 questions with bullet points under the question. That's what the working group is striving to develop output around. So, that results in a certain degree of focus for each working group. I think, though, where it comes up is when there is, a topic that invariably the 2 working groups are each discussing, and I always go to all the meetings, so I'm aware of that. So then, how do we deal with that? In some cases, it makes sense to keep the 2 groups separate, but working in parallel on issues that might overlap. In other cases, as Lisa pointed out with the guest speaker, it's better if the guest speaker is going to address something that's literally within the charter of two working groups. It doesn't make sense to have the isolated meetings. But as far as output goes, that's really, again, defined by the charter, and that is how we can keep things, separate and deal with the overlap. But thank you.
Dean, can I just quickly?
Please, yeah.
So, many of us are members in and in fact, last time, I think all of the working group chairs were members of all of the other working groups. So it prevents siloing, so we are all aware of what's going on in the other groups, and there are sometimes things where we have to draw boundaries, like last time between 6G and advanced spectrum sharing. It was clear that there are things that are 6G which are not spectrum sharing, and there's things that are spectrum sharing that are not 6G. But just understanding, who gets to focus on what is part of the working group discussion process.
Yeah, thanks, Manisha, for that. Also, I wanted to say one more thing, which is, what does the output of the working groups consist of that the full TAC would then consider? And there really are two forms, but there could be others. One form would be a set of a presentation that would be given at the full TAC meeting, just the way Andy and Monisha did, and that would include slides with bullet points, whatever. And at our last meeting of the year, it would include recommendations, and then the full TAC would actually take a vote on the recommendations that are in the document. There can also be output that is a white paper. Amit did a great job with a white paper, taking the drafting, the pencil, with Andy and Monisha's heavy involvement and many others in their working group, with a white paper on particular issues in spectrum sharing. And then it's the same thing. There would be, an extensive, exhaustive, borderline painful editing process, group editing process within the working group. And then it would be shared within the full TAC, which can spawn yet additional suggestions, revisions, comments, questions. And then the white paper would then get voted on by the TAC, and then that would go both on the FCC.gov website, and it would be, the official output of the TAC. So that is another important part of our potential output. Okay, any other comments, questions, issues? Okay, so then we will now turn to the AI/ML working group and Lisa.
Okay, great. Okay. Here we go. Oh, I just gave, there, too much clicking going on. Well, I'm pleased to be back co-chairing the AI/ML working group. I am representing Ericsson North America, and I will let my co-chair introduce himself.
Okay, and I'm Adam Drobot, and for this meeting, I'm representing Stealth Software Technologies. Okay.
Great, thanks, Adam. So in order to join the group, the meeting is scheduled on Wednesdays from 3 to 4 Eastern. We've actually moved that up to be 1 hour earlier due to popular request. I think that was a good suggestion. Same day, Wednesdays. Our first meeting will be April 3rd. If you'd like to join, similar to the other groups, send an email to me, Lisa Guess at cradlepoint.com, or to Adam, and also copy the TAC at fcc.gov. And of course, this reference is in the presentation materials that you've received. I will also reiterate, we can only accept people who have been vetted for FCC TAC membership, so make sure you get that done before you ask to join our group. And please go ahead and include all these emails. Every correspondence we have of such a nature has to be copied to the TAC at fcc.gov.
And I would say it's worthwhile adding, I think we do heavily rely on resources that you may have within your organization. So if there is somebody else that you would like to have involved in the AI/ML working group, pass the name on to Martin, and he will go through the process of getting them vetted so we can include those individuals.
And to be clear, they won't become full TAC members, but they will be able to participate in sub-working groups that have very specific topics. A great example would be last year when we did safe uses of AI. We had some excellent experts from other people at some of the companies represented here, and that was their specialty at the company. Okay, so next slide, we'll dive right into the charter. I don't plan to editorialize either. I'm just going to read through the charter. Adam was added to the working group a bit late, so I'm planning to read through the whole charter, but please feel free to make any commentary, Adam. So first topic, explore the use of AI ML methods to improve the utilization and administration of spectrum that includes licensed, unlicensed, and shared, based on the fundamental characteristics of propagation, interference, signal processing, and protocols. How could the scalability aspect of AI ML algorithms support such methods by use of techniques such as parallelization, dimensionality reduction, sampling, and approximation? Second piece, evaluate the use of AI ML methods and techniques applied to assuring the safety, security, and performance of network equipment, network control, and network operations in a network environment that increasingly relies on automation, is seeing a rapid growth of new network connections, and is increasingly digitized and softwareized. Second page, explore and evaluate AI-enabled networks in optimizing long convergence time, memory complexity, and complex behavior of machine learning algorithms under uncertainty, as well as how the highly dynamic channel, traffic, and mobility conditions of the network contribute to the challenges of AI networks. How can AI ML be leveraged to help better understand real-time spectrum usage, either at the front end, for example, improved sensing, or the back end, improved analytics? Are there opportunities for the Commission to use AI ML to improve its analysis of data presently collected and housed in databases like ULS or Universal Licensing System? What are the implications and complications of using AI ML in optimizing wireless and wired networks performance by analyzing network traffic patterns, network failures, proactive corrective actions, network routing, and predicting network congestion? How can AI ML techniques be used to support the integration and interoperability of wired and wireless networks, such as heterogeneous access networks, multi-domain networks, and adaptive network slicing? And the final page, how can AI ML techniques be used to design and implement novel network architectures and protocols for wired and wireless networks, such as software-defined networking, SDN, network function virtualization, NFV, and information-centric networking, ICN? How can AI ML techniques be used to address the challenges of data quality, availability, privacy, and security in wired and wireless networks, such as data cleansing, data fusion, data anonymization, and data protection? And finally, what approaches should be taken, if any, on testing and certification of AI ML softwareization of network components, capabilities, and equipment? And I will do a little editorializing, I guess, here, or if you wish to call it. I think this is a very meaty charter. I think there are a lot of good specifics in here, and I want to thank the committee for providing such a rich charter for us to work on. I think it's a lot to dig our teeth into. This year, I believe, will be our third or possibly even fourth year of the AI ML working group. And I really appreciated the chairwoman's remarks about how AI ML, and in particular AI, generative AI, can be a positive, especially when it comes to network operations, network performance, network optimization, network recovery, all things that I mean, the network has become a critical utility for us, and AI can bring to bear many positive aspects and benefits into this environment. Adam, I don't know if you have any more comments.
Well, I would just say it's all about smart pipes.
Well said. Thank you. With that, I think we've come to the end of our section.
Okay, a question?
To what level of detail does the working group get into? The reason I asked is because when you talk about AI/ML, take a vendor like Mavenir with Open RAN solution, how AI/ML would be applied in an Open RAN network with like a radio intelligent controller could be different than how AI/ML is applied in a closed solution. So I wanted to get an understanding as to
all the nitty-gritty you can bring to the table.
Absolutely. That's, completely.
There is no level that's
too
beyond what we
much,
do.
yeah, right.
And if I do, if I look back on our August presentation, I believe counting the appendices, it may have had about 120 slides. So we don't present all of that, but we do look to build very rich appendices into the information that we provide.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other questions, comments? So I will just say two things. So first, that is not the first time that Chairwoman Rosenworcel has espoused that optimistic, in her words, view about AI/ML, and it's, I think it's interesting and encouraging and shows a deeper level of understanding that maybe others who I won't name in Washington, D.C. Would have about it. That's point one. And point two, I think, so this is really an area where the TAC can make a substantial difference within the FCC. There is no FCC AI/ML Bureau. There is, it kind of cuts across and it's underneath, behind the scenes of obviously many different things that the FCC works on, but it's really an area where having our outside input into the FCC, both in terms of, information, levels of detail, and perspectives, I think it's an area where the TAC really is adding value. So I really appreciate, Lisa and Adam, your presentations are always very rich, 100 or more slides with all kinds of information, and it's all things that just in the normal run of business does not come into the FCC. So thanks for that.
Yeah. Dean, if I can add a couple of things that are, just sort of as background. Last year, the Senate held hearings on AI and ML. One of the presenters was Stuart Russell, and I would say the TAC actually hosted him 3 times, ran overtime each time, and I would say much of the testimony that he eventually gave, we had actually covered in our deliberations. So that's number one. Number two, and I think this may be what the chairwoman is referring to, there have been a number of fairly prominent publications. I think there was one by Alex Karp in the New York Times that equated the power of AI to atomic weapons, a very negative look at it. A lot of experts in the field, in fact, signed a letter saying, let's stop all work on AI, et cetera, et cetera. And, there is a flip side to it. I think IEEE Spectrum actually did a survey of workers, and there is a bipolar distribution of folks who feel that AI is dangerous because it is reaching a critical point of what they call AGI, artificial general intelligence, competing with human beings. And I would say our context is a very positive one that says, no, this isn't about how the human mind works. It's about how we get the value of computing and AI as part of that, in fact, to solve some of the difficult technical problems that we have in telecommunications, okay? And so I think that may have been a little bit lengthy, but I can tell you there is a very strong public debate on all of these issues. And one of the things I really appreciate that is in the charter is a look at how do you actually test what's being done, okay? And how does the FCC develop a philosophy that there is public trust in how AI and ML is actually used in our area?
Thanks a lot for that, Adam. Any other comments, questions, issues, concerns? Oh, Amit.
Just a question around the products that we might see. I'm thinking that we do not necessarily have to align our products along the specific work items that were mentioned here. For example, I can see in item 1, we're talking about spectrum policies, and item 2, we're talking about collecting the data, making spectrum analysis backend. So I can see a very, very common theme arising across item 1 and item 2. Hopefully we'll have the freedom to produce a report that will be very useful. That's more of a comment question.
Yeah, no, I think, part of, I would say, having the first few meetings is to actually come to a consensus within the working group on what our product should be. I think we have a very long laundry list of items that we were asked to take a look at, and I would say some of those are probably more important than others. I would say we have a limited degree of capability within the working group, okay? And I think having a discussion of what makes sense and what doesn't is something that we'll coordinate with our liaisons to see where we land, okay?
Thanks. Henning?
So I'm not quite sure that was quite part of a charter. What I saw in past discussions was a bit of a lack of analyzing the reliability trade-offs, particularly given kind of I'm worried that we're seeing some of the early repeat of the autonomous vehicle issues, namely it works well 99% of the time, but then nobody understands why it doesn't work well the 1% of the time. And we've obviously all seen very large-scale outages in communication networks recently where even non-machine learning type of systems become difficult to manage during normal operations for hours where you lose control of a network, essentially. So I wonder if there's an opportunity here beyond just discussing some of the technical aspects, also what would be the human-machine interaction when things go horribly wrong, and how you recover control of a network under those circumstances, kind of the equivalent of taking over when the car tells you you have to put your hands on the steering wheel again.
Okay. So, Henning, and I think this came from David Tannenhouse, who was part of the working group. I think I'm not going to go into it in any depth, but the issue was actually dealt with at some level, probably not as much depth as we wanted to. Okay, and I think what David came out with, and I think we, as a group agreed with, is it is important to write the software that goes with AI and ML, where there is a human being in control at some level, okay, that's actionable, okay? And I think it goes back to, I think, that last point in the charter, and that is evolving testing regimes that give you high degrees of reliability, and metrics that go along with that is absolutely crucial, okay? And I would say the science of doing that is not fully baked at this point in time. So the question is, in a positive way, how do you actually create a roadmap that allows you to do that baking in a proper way, okay? I hope that answers your question, okay?
I'd also point out as we finished one of our conclusions, I believe it was last year, possibly the year before, we even called out keep humans in the equation. We put it in some very plain language.
Absolutely.
In some of our conclusions, because you raise a very, very important point.
Yep, thanks a lot. Obviously, key question. Andy, did you have something else? No? Any other questions, comments, issues about the charter for the AI ML working group? Anyone online with a question? Okay, then we will move to our third and final working group presentation, which will be the 6G working group, which is chaired by Brian Daly of AT&T and Manu Gosain of Northeastern, and I guess Brian and Manu are online. Brian and Manu, you can take it away.
Yes, thank you, Dean. I'll go ahead and start off introducing myself. This is Brian Daly, representing AT&T. Manu, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, good morning, everyone. Manu Gosain, Senior Director at Institute for Wireless Internet of Things at Northeastern University.
Yeah, first, I'd like to just thank Dean, the commission staff, and the chairwoman for allowing us to continue the investigation into 6G and provide advisories and recommendations on the evolving 6G technology. If we could bring the slides up. So, as we all know, since we provided our advisements and recommendations in August of last year, there have been a number of activities that have, continued on in the development of 6G. And if we move to the next slide, I'll just highlight several of those. Back up one, please. Yeah, there we go. I'll just highlight some of the activities that have occurred in the industry since our last advisory and recommendations report that we presented. In November of last year, the ITUR released their IMT 2030 framework document, which is describing the framework for what an IMT 2030 system will look like. The next phase, which is begun and will continue through 2027, will continue the definition of the relevant requirements and evaluation criteria for potential radio interface technologies for IMT 2030. Also, as been previously mentioned, the World Radio Conference concluded in the fall and in early winter, and the planning process has begun for the World Radio Conference in 2027. And spectrum allocations for 6G are a topic that will be continued to be addressed through these World Radio Conference. In addition, 3GPP has committed to develop 6G specifications. The target is March of this year to develop the 6G timeline decisions. And there is also going to be a stage 1 workshop on IMT 2030 use cases that will be held in May of this year. And the first all working group wide 6G workshop is tentatively slated to be in March of 2025. And we'll expect to see the first studies for 6G that will begin in release 20. And to give you a perspective, release 19 has just started, so we're one release away from beginning the 6G studies. And the IMT 2030 submission and normative work for 6G and 3GPP are expected to start beginning in release 21. The ATIS NextG Alliance, which is driving many of the requirements and technology evaluations and research for here in North America, have released several reports, including the future of 6G basic radio technologies and other reports related to 6G evolution. ATIS and the EU Smart Networks and Services have also begun a joint undertaking to publish beyond 5G and 6G roadmap, which is continuing the European and US collaboration on 6G. India's Prime Minister Modi and President Biden also did sign an MOU between the Bharat 6G Alliance and the NextG Alliance, and established 2 joint workforces focused on Open RAN collaboration and research and development in 5G and 6G technologies. If we move to the next slide, please. In addition, the US, Australia, Canada, the Czech Republic, Finland, France, Japan, the Republic of Korea, Sweden, and the United Kingdom issued a joint statement endorsing the principles for 6G as being secure, open, and resilient by design. 5G Americas has also released several white papers, including 3GPP technology trends. And there have been 2 O-RAN Alliance Next Generation Research Group 6G workshops that have been held. The first one had a theme of embracing AI towards 6G RAN, and the second, Architecture Evolution, Digital Twin, and Convergence of Communications and Computing in the 6G Era. The NGNM has released a position statement on an operator view for 6G. There have been numerous conferences on 6G, including the 2023 IEEE Future Networks World Forum and the 2023 Brooklyn 6G Summit. In addition to that, there have also been claims that have been made on launching the first 6G test satellite by China Mobile. So again, we're seeing some of the operators worldwide beginning to do some 6G testing. Next slide, please. So I'll go through the first slide of the charter, and then I'll hand it over to Manu. So as we can see, the ongoing efforts that have been undertaken in industry on 6G really have paved the way to what our charter is as we continue this investigation to provide advisements and recommendations on the evolution to the next generation. We will provide information on the development and deployment of 6G technology, make recommendations and provide insights on new developments and expectations from technological and regulatory perspectives that the FCC should pay attention to. We'll look at how openness and customization capabilities in 6G benefit supporting flexibility and agile services and its coexistence with 5G. What are the infrastructure needs for 6G and how can the Commission proactively address them? And how is 6G progressing or expected to progress as standards in international fora? And what are the key points of emerging consensus or disagreement? And what are the competing 6G visions and expectations on key technological points between operators to compare and contrast? And with the next slide, I'll turn it over to my co-lead, Manu.
Thanks a lot, Brian. So continuing down the charter, these questions are going to delve into the individual technologies that we are seeing. And 6G, as we have already seen in some of the vision papers and so far based on the final report that we submitted, is going to be a hybrid architecture. So we are going to have to look at non-terrestrial networks, the LEO, MEO, GEO satellites, and what frequency bands are going to be under consideration, and what services are those going to enable, and what sort of complexities are going to come out of that. Continuing, we're going to investigate the millimeter wave and terahertz bands for 6G systems. So this will be looking at use cases and technology developments, whether it be indoor, outdoor systems, feasibility analysis, as well as where the state of the art of academia and industry is in this space. Continuing forward, we're going to do a deep dive in different verticals and different use cases across a high level of mobility. So in 6G, again, based on the 5G triangle of URLLC, MMTC, and EMBB, we're going to have to understand and present back to the FCC how industry is compartmentalizing the various verticals and use cases across driving, AR, VR, edge computing, and smart cities as well. Localization positioning is going to be very important. There is a very keen interest in the 6G domain in integrated or joint sensing and communication needs, and the idea of how that combines with the advances in active antenna systems, beam steering antennas, and meta surfaces and reflective surfaces will be explored as well. Next slide, please. Continuing that theme in terms of how 6G networks are going to have some societal effects and how do we monitor some of the privacy and security risks, this is going to have a little bit of overlap with the AIML group, and probably we'll have to lean on how that group has tackled the massive data collection processing questions. But this will also be layered with the ethical and social considerations, privacy considerations, IRB, etc., because they will all start from the formative stages of technology development and the ingestion of AIML data sets all the way from the radio access network to the network, as well as in the management and orchestration layers. Continuing forward, we're going to have to look at security and other adjacent technologies. So these are the domains of native AI, the domain of distributed ledger, blockchain technologies, physical layer security. So this is security on the hardware devices, how RF fingerprints can be used for determining location, and how quantum communication and visible light communication will fit into this hybridized architectural approach of 6G. Last but not the least, the networks and the interplay between backward compatibility of how 5G networks will continue to be supported and the massive volume of devices that have already been field deployed in the domains of IoT and combined with low latency and seamless connectivity for near and non-real time control loops as we move towards the magical mythical number of 1 millisecond. Next slide, please. So yeah, in terms of the format, the plan is to continue. This is a new charter. It's a new group of folks. So we do want to let folks know that we do meet Thursdays, 4 to 5 p.m. Eastern. The first meeting is scheduled for April 4th, and the initial cadence will be every other week. The format and the work products that we have delivered and use as input are primarily through subject matter expert presentations and also sub-working group discussions, leveraging the expertise of our fellow TAC members. And then the work product outputs last time was a white paper, and this time, given the fever pitch and the pace of innovation happening in standards bodies as well as in global consortia and alliances, we'll have to come to a general consensus and present that requirement back. So please do send an email if you're interested to Brian, myself, and please CC the TAC representatives, and you'll be added to our list, have access to our shared database of repository, and also start contributing to the various topics that we have to undertake in the next in the next 6-8 months. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Martin.
Thanks a lot, Manu and Brian. That was great. Questions, comments, anyone would like to make? What I will say is this is another area where the TAC really can add value. The way the commission is organized is sort of a docket by docket, spectrum band by spectrum band. Sometimes they are able to sort of cut across that, but that's really the way the commission does its work, whereas we've been asked to take a much broader view, both in terms of the technology development, but also the global development. So a lot of the global aspects of the development of 6G in all its various forms, and as I mentioned in my opening comments, other technologies that are being developed in parallel with 6G, such as Wi-Fi 7, LEO, and other forms of satellite broadband, et cetera. We can bring information into the FCC. We can give the FCC input in ways that they're really not, if in just doing their work on a docket-by-docket basis, they're not inclined to get. So I think our output for the 6G group is really an opportunity to add substantial value and really help the commission do its work. With that, Henning, question?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was this long list of 20 different existing efforts on framing and just defining even what 6G is, which in itself is somewhat of a amorphous thing that ranges anything from 5G++ to something much more substantial in difference in that. So I'm curious where the committee, particular chairs, see themselves as adding a particular differentiation to those existing efforts, which are, I think, at this moment, sufficiently large to be confusing to anybody who is not following it on a daily basis. My second question is one that I didn't quite see was, at least in my personal opinion, some of the work that was done early on with 5G development turned out to be, let's just say, less than predictive and in terms of applications, in terms of impact, in terms of the economics of 5G, where hype probably was overtaking reality. So what efforts, particularly in light of my first comment, might the group do to provide a little bit of a counterpoint as opposed to simply be 6G is one more G of hyping technology?
Those are both very valid points. I'll give my own answer and then turn it over to Brian and Mano. I mean, I think first, again, the commission can't just wait until, for the next X years, until 6G is fully defined, fully standardized, fully developed from a technical point of view, and then say, oh my God, we need to provide for this. So the commission has to work in certain ways in parallel, but other than attending 3GPP meetings, which they do themselves, a lot of those fora that Brian and Manu were talking about, the commission doesn't necessarily have all that much visibility into. So, there's one function of the 6G working group of the TAC, which is just feeding important information into the FCC at an early time in the process, because again, 6G right now, it is, in such a very early stage. It hasn't been even, substantially defined, but getting that level of information, of important detailed information into the FCC in a digestible format, that actually is performing, I would say, an important function. Then on, the counterbalance between the hype versus the reality and all of that, and of course we can have that discussion for every prior G and every prior form of Wi-Fi, every prior form of, fiber, satellite, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's no question, the commission wants our charge here is to give the commission, the most reliable, actionable, fully accurate set of information possible. So you're completely right, Henning. We're not trying to just be a 6G hype machine and just, cranking that up to a higher level. We're trying to separate fact from fiction. We're trying to separate aspirational goals from reality. We're trying to give the commission a sense of the actual timeline, not just the timeline on a PowerPoint slide, the timeline to when they will actually have to make important decisions for 6G. So those are my answers to your very fair and important questions. Brian and Manu, is there points you'd like to add?
I think you did very well, especially cutting through the hype and providing advisories and recommendations to the commission on the key topics that they need to be aware of as 6G develops. As Henning mentioned, the list of 20 or so items that we had of ongoing industry activities. Unless you're deeply involved in all of them, it's kind of hard to sort through all the hype and understand what's real, what's important, and what the commission should actually focus and hone in on. And Manu and I's job, as well as the working group members, is to try to sort through all of that and come up with those actionable recommendations and advisements that will help the commission understand what's happening in the industry and what direction they need to be aware of. Manu, anything to add?
Yeah, all I'll add is this is the second iteration of the working group. Last year was the first time we went down the route, and I think a collective decision was to have kind of an inverse funnel role. So the idea was to not leave anything. That's why you see a very verbose, dense, state-of-the-art or a global view of where things are. So we really haven't left much that's happening out there. And I think that's, due to the contributions of the working group members bringing to our attention what's happening. I think in this iteration, we can be a little bit smarter, make the different connections. And I believe that industry and other alliances are also aligning. And I think I just want to reference, the May 8th, 10th 3GPP SA1 workshop, where all of these global consortia and alliances have been invited to present their own views on these topics. So you are going to start to see those many-to-many connect. Distill that down for the commission. The counterbalance, I think we are engineers at heart, so the idea is to be as objective in terms of the technology evaluation. So based on how this working group has worked, where we've invited subject matter experts and academics primarily, so we get real true data, we get real true technology development, and what is actually working, what's not working is presented. But again, without passing any judgment, the idea is to present the facts as presented in a completely neutral, unbiased way, and then leave that for interpretation to the commission. That was it.
Yeah, the one other thing I'll add, and this comes, we saw in the initial slides, the NGNM had presented a paper on 6G from an operator standpoint, and I think that will be another interesting aspect that we explore is what are the operators thinking as far as their current state of 5G deployments and the evolution as we move towards 6G. What are some of the operator views on that as well?
Thanks. I will just say one more thing because I think, it's obviously a very important question, and it cuts across all the developments of pretty much all technologies. And that is, merely reflecting the hype is a very short-term strategy. In this city, I've been around long enough. Eventually, at the end of the day, the truth is going to emerge. So I find that there is no question it is a strategy practiced every day, 40 hours a week in Washington, D.C. and other important places. But yeah, it's at the end of the day, it's not going to prevail, and we don't want to. It's a fair admonition. We don't want to fall into that. So thanks. Amit?
So just wanted to make a comment that indeed our charter here is to cater to the advancement of 6G, but there are many adjacent industries like the semiconductors, computing, and so on and so forth that are pivotal to the advancement of 6G. So let us not forget, let us bring in the corresponding advancement also into this discussion. This is just a suggestion from my side.
Thanks for that.
Yes, good.
Yeah, I wanted to say one thing on that, which is some of you represent companies and associations that have, that are over here at the FCC making filings, participating in the nitty-gritty work of the FCC every single day, and that's great. We're glad to have your input. But a number of you are from companies that have no involvement whatsoever at the FCC, don't participate in any way, and maybe aren't even, and have lots of people in your company who might even say, like the FCC, what does that have to do with our work? We are very glad to have you. We are very glad to have you give us perspectives on all these issues that the FCC doesn't hear every single day. It's very, very valuable to have your participation. It's going to take a little bit of work on your end to sort of make the connections and see where you can add value, and I appreciate that. And it probably is going to, it'll take some time. It'll probably be an evolving process, but the idea of having lots of people on this group who aren't over here lobbying the FCC every single day, who don't have necessarily clearly defined interests, that's a big differentiator for our group, and it's important. Ricken?
No, thanks, Dan. I just want to ask this question, maybe if you can remind, somewhere I saw in the public notice, but what's the end date for this charter, and how often are we meeting here? Is it every 3 months, 6 months?
Martin?
Thank you.
So the official end date is early September 2025, when the charter would expire, and presumably we would recharter at that point. We don't have a determination for the dates, but the charter says roughly quarterly, so that would be kind of the expectation here.
I think Dale Hatfield online has a question. Dale?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
We can, yeah, perfect.
Thank you. I have had the honor in the past, along with several other people, of serving both on the TAC and the FCC's Commerce Spectrum Advisory Committee. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the coordination between the two. Now, I'm not talking about the national spectrum strategy and its implementation and so forth, but whether what I'm talking about is the research that's been conducted. It has been conducted in the SISMAC on topics like uh, spectrum efficiency and things like that. I sense there is a fair amount of useful material there. So I guess my question is more generally, if you could speak to how coordination between the FCC and the SISMAC will be handled going forward. Thank you.
So thanks for that question, Dale. I'll give my answer, and Ron and Martin and Sean or anyone else for that matter, feel free to chime in. So the SISMAC, for those who might not know, is a advisory committee to the Commerce Department, which advises the Commerce Department on issues similar to the issues that the TAC advises the FCC on. And even going one step back, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, the FCC manages and regulates spectrum that is used privately and by state and local governments. The Commerce Department, through NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, regulates spectrum that's used by the federal government. So NTIA has established the CSMAC as an advisory committee similar to the TAC to advise NTIA on issues pertaining to their domain. To make things even a little more complicated, the NTIA is part of the Commerce Department, which is part of the executive branch. On the other hand, the FCC is an independent federal agency which is not part of the executive branch. It has a congressional mandate that defines its roles and responsibilities. So the question is, how do we coordinate in some fashion between what we do and what the CISMAC does, given the important differences between the FCC and NTIA and between the TAC and the CISMAC? The way we've done it in the past, Dale, would be really through the NTIA staff. So we had an NTIA staffer participate as a member of the relevant working groups. And I think that if we can do that going forward, I think that is a very good idea. And then the NTIA staffer is a recipient of output from the CISMAC, and I think that's been the formal way of communication. I think the other method of coordination is more informal, which, and by the way, Ron and Martin coordinate and have, there's a memorandum of understanding between NTIA and the FCC. Ron and Martin have interactions quite regularly with the technical staff of NTIA. So, one way to do this is the way we've done it is by having an NTIA staffer participate and kind of in an observer plus role in the working groups. And then the other way is, of course, all of us as members of the Washington, D.C. telecom community, we don't operate in a vacuum, so we know generally what the CISMAC is doing. I know Dale is on the CISMAC. Others are either might be with a company who have someone on it. So, the informal way, certainly we're open to. And we have guest speakers who are both presenting to us, and they may be either members of the CISMAC or they've made similar presentations to the CISMAC. So that's my answer. Ron and Martin, do you have anything you want to add?
Thank you, Dean. I think you summed it up pretty well there. But beyond that, I also have very regular, if not daily, hourly discussions sometimes with my counterpart at NTIA, Charles Cooper. So beyond the CSMAC, if there are topics of mutual interest that are bubbling up in either the CSMAC or the TAC that involve agency discussions, we at least have that opportunity on a very regular basis to discuss those topics. So beyond the formal structure of the CSMAC and the TAC and the liaisons or observers that we have that participate in both from the agency perspective, there's several other layers of opportunity to have those broader discussions.
Thanks. And we have had Charles and his team make presentations to working groups. Martin, anything you want to add?
Just one minor amendment is that we actually do have TAC member this year from NTIA, Li Ching Sung, so she'll be in attendance in future meetings.
Great, great. Thank you for that, Dale. It is an important question, and we don't want to be reinventing the wheel and to actually duplicate work of the SISMAC. That is not adding value at all. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. Ian.
Understanding that TAC members can drop in on some of the working groups, and looking at the charters of the working groups, they're pretty deep and broad. I did look through the slides before I asked this. Do the working groups, I assume, will publish the agenda for a specific meeting ahead of time? Does that go to all the TAC members, or how do you know what the working group is going to be discussing?
So the working groups, they each operate via like email reflector type thing. So if you can sign up to receive all the emails from the working group, and if you do that, you will see what the agenda is for each meeting, and you might even, I think you'll probably quite often see the slides after the fact for each meeting. So I would recommend doing that. Ricken?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dane. I just wanted to add to the previous question on the CSMAC that just a couple of things. A number of us are on CSMAC as well, or were in CSMAC, and there is a fair deal of collaboration. The current charter of CSMAC hasn't been announced, or the membership hasn't been announced yet, so that's just FYI. But the other thing is that the spectrum implementation plan, has number of items assigned to CSMAC already. So this is just my interpretation that when the charter is announced and the membership is announced, there are going to be number of charters already outlined in the implementation plan that's going to go into the CSMAC, and I think a number of things that includes spectrum sharing, et cetera, would be overlapping with our charter, so very likely that, yes, we'll have that coordination going in. And one last thing, that this TAC is actually where we are representing our employers or entities. CSMAC is independent assignment, so there you are not actually representing an entity. I mean, I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Thanks. That's all very good input. And yeah, I mean, the overall mosaic here of telecommunications regulation in the United States is interesting and not always straightforward, and having that kind of input on actually what's happening in CSMAC day to day is helpful. So thanks. Any other questions, comments, issues for the 6G working group? Anything online? Okay. So thank you very much, Brian and Mano. We really appreciate all your hard work in managing this, blizzard of activity all over the world with 6G. So thanks. With that, we've completed our agenda. I'm happy to say way ahead of schedule. We're not sure we'll attain that for every meeting, but that's good to do. Unless anyone has any comments or issues, thanks again to everyone who attended in person. Thanks for the folks who attended online. Please do sign up for the working groups. That's really where the hard work is going to get done, and we really appreciate your input and need your input and perspectives, and again, to separate hype from reality for sure. And thanks everyone. I'm excited as we begin our work. Thank you.